hamburger today. They're doing that for schools. They're not going to pay schools about $1 billion this year, the last 3 payments of the year. And in exchange, they'll pay the schools the beginning of the next fiscal year for the last 3 months of this fiscal year. And they're going to do that for another $400 million of other state spending that they normally would do. And so they're basically moving spending that would normally occur this year into next year, and considering that a balanced budget. So that's going to basically, by not paying bills for the last 3 months, that will keep the state afloat till the end of the fiscal year, the end of June. The question is, you can do this math pretty simple. I can borrow $1.2 billion. They're doing $1.3 billion of delayed payments. That's a problem. Just the simple math there. Depending on when they plan on making those payments back, we could be right back into the IOU territory in July or August. I cannot tell you whether or not that's going to happen. It can be avoided if they spread out those payments long enough to keep us close. But because they haven't decided what their budget's going to be, they're still negotiating and working on that down at the Capitol. In fact, I think actually right now I left it at about 4:45, and they were still down there working today to go down to the airport. So having put all that stuff together, the state of Arizona is literally broke. I mean, literally broke. So how do you get out of this mess? Well, first of all, the governor's pushing this temporary tax increase. I don't know about you, but I have yet to find a tax that was actually temporary that stayed that way. Now, actually, I take that back. There was one tax that was levied that was temporary. It was the Spanish-American War telephone tax and telegraph tax, and it was repealed in 1996. Got to be clear which century it was repealed in. That's a temporary tax for you. And the reason why we say this is because it doesn't solve the problem. Even if it actually brings in the $1 billion that they say it will, which I don't think it will, you just have kicked the can 3 years down the road. You're going to have that same $1 billion problem 3 years from now. What really worries me about doing something like this is the economic impact. Think about this for a minute. If you're a business and you're having trouble making ends meet, what do? If you have trouble moving your inventory, what do? Raise prices? No, you lower prices, you have a sale. That's what brings people in, move your inventory. What are we having trouble with right now? Selling homes, selling cars, selling durable goods. We're having a recession, by definition, is a slowdown in the number of transactions. So you're going to make transactions more expensive? That's exactly the opposite of what you would do economically. And so, and we've seen this in the past. Whenever you've seen a tax increase, it changes behavior. Because a lot of people make the mistake of thinking economics is about math. It's not. Economics is about psychology and human behavior. Math is just how you keep score. And so economically, this tax increase will probably and likely to prolong the recession by at least another 6 months, maybe more. Now, the good news is we are seeing a bottom starting to develop in the economy. In fact, my economic forecast, the one that I've been giving for the last year and a half now, actually I think it's more like 2 years, seems to be holding true. And if you want to understand the economy, think Nike. Not Tiger Woods, that's a better description of Congress, but think the Nike logo. You know that Nike swoosh? You got the bubble up on the front end. That's the housing bubble. Then you got the crash down, that's what we've been living in the last 3 years. Then you got the little saddle and that long tail out. That little saddle is where we are right now. Assuming no other shocks, no other bad things happening, which means we probably want to keep Congress out of session for the rest of the year or longer, we will start seeing a bottom develop here over the next 6 months. And in fact, by the end of this year, we should start seeing a very slow, very mild recovery start. Again, that long tail. It's not going to be a fast recovery. This is going to be a slow recovery because if you think back, during the last recession, what happened? You had the dot-com bubble, 9/11, you crashed down, and then you had the housing bubble kind of pull us out of it. There isn't another bubble out there to pull us out. which is a good thing because then you keep doing this up and down. We've got to have much more natural growth that's going to pull us out of this thing. So it's going to be, the good news is it's not going to get much worse, assuming somebody in the government doesn't do something stupid. But we're finding a bottom. But that's another reason why, okay, you're just now finding a bottom. Why in the world would you do something that could cause this? So I think it's a really bad idea to do the sales tax increase. You can balance the budget without it. It's not that hard to do so. You just follow a simple principle. It's called not spending more than you make. I mean, you have to do it at home. You have to do it in your business. Why isn't the state any different? How do you do this? Well, first of all, freeze spending. Just freezing spending solves half the problem. The next thing you do, what do you do when you've got an individual that's in trouble financially? They've maxed out their credit cards, they're up to their eyeballs in debt. What do? You grab the scissors and cut up their credit cards. It's the first thing you do. We need to do that for the state of Arizona. Our Constitution has a debt limit of $350,000. That's a small t. That's the debt limit for the Constitution. Now you may be thinking, wait a second, he just talked about selling the buildings and mortgaging for 20 years at $735. Yeah, that's a lot more. Actually, the state of Arizona has accumulated a whole bunch of debts over the last 10 years. The total debts against the general fund right now total $4.5 billion with a B. In fact, the annual debt service cost for the state of Arizona right now, each year, is $452 million. That's how much they're paying each and every year. And we'll be doing that. Some of these debts go out to 2039. Some very long debts outstanding. So, what do? Well, you do a debt consolidation loan and you cut up the credit cards. What I propose is we go back to we put a real debt limit in the Constitution. Obviously, the $350,000 hasn't worked. They've found a lot of ways to get around it. So let's put a real one in that says you cannot incur debt, governor, legislature, without getting the voters' permission. That's a real limit. It's the way we do it for cities and counties and school districts and every other government in the state. They got to get your permission before they start borrowing money. Second, when you're doing that, you do a debt consolidation loan. Get off all those high expensive credit cards. Get off all those high expensive rent-to-own deals like they're doing the Capitol. And consolidate all that debt into one issuance. You can save enough money that same payment, that $452 million for the next 20 years, you can actually save at 5% interest, which is conservative. We could probably do better than that. But at 5% interest, you can pull out $1.4 billion. That'll get you through the next year without any additional cuts. Actually, over the next 2 years. So you can actually bring in some temporary revenue and you're not paying. This is called working smart as opposed to working hard. Financially, we can do this, and it puts a real limit on them so they're not continuing to do the games. I mean, they're talking about right now they're discussing selling off the rest of the state buildings they haven't already sold and renting them back. They're talking about basically canceling the current lottery and issuing a new lottery in which 100% of the revenue goes to the general fund, and then they're going to bond against that for the next 20 years. So they get all the money from what the lottery would collect. They get half the money the lottery would collect over the next 20 years today, and then nothing back for the rest of the time the lottery is there. I mean, this is the type of games that will continue to be played and keeping the state from actually doing its job, and that's not spending more than they make. Getting spending under control. So, okay, we've talked about the budget, we've talked about the economy, let's talk about a few other things. Let's talk about illegal immigration for a moment. I don't know if you've heard, but the federal government, the administration, is eliminating the fence. They're cutting the fence. They're not going to fund fence construction anymore. And as a result, I don't know if you probably remember Napolitano was famous. She made all the papers for saying, you show me a 30-foot fence, I'll show you a 31-foot ladder, which is probably why she recommended getting rid of the fence. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure you can find a guy running through the desert with a 31-foot ladder easier. It's a lot easier to find.